The rain hammered against the cedar shingles like lead shot, each drop another reminder that the world beyond these walls still existed. Jacob Thornton sat in his chair by the dying fire, watching the flames struggle against the damp logs he'd hauled in that morning. The whiskey in his glass had gone warm, untouched for the past hour. He'd poured it out of habit, not thirst. The cabin groaned under the weight of the storm, its log walls shifting with familiar sounds that had become his only companions these past 3 years. 20 feet by 15 feet of rough-hewn timber, chinked with mud and moss, standing alone on this mountainside like a monument to his self-imposed exile. The nearest town, Cedar Ridge, lay 2 days' ride through the pines, and that was exactly how he wanted it. Lightning split the darkness outside, illuminating the sparse interior for a heartbeat, a narrow cot against the far wall, a table scarred by years of use, shelves holding his meager supplies, and the Winchester propped beside the door. Everything a man needed to survive. Nothing more. Jacob ran his fingers through his unkempt beard, feeling the gray that had crept in among the brown. 34 years old, though the mirror, when he bothered to look, showed a man who'd lived longer. The war had taken 5 years of his life, but what came after had aged him more. Sarah's face drifted through his mind like smoke, and he pushed it away with practiced determination. 3 years, and still her memory could ambush him when his guard dropped. He'd come to these mountains seeking silence, and he'd found it. The kind of silence that pressed against your ears until you could hear your own heartbeat. The kind that made you understand why hermits went mad. But madness might be preferable to the memories that visited in the quiet hours. The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Jacob reached for another log, then stopped. Let it die. He'd sleep cold tonight. Wouldn't be the first time. The blankets were thick enough, and the morning would come whether he was warm or not. That's when he heard it. A sound that didn't belong to the storm. Soft at first, almost lost in the rain's percussion, but persistent, rhythmic, deliberate. Someone was knocking on his door. Jacob's hand moved to the Colt Navy revolver on his hip before his mind fully registered the sound. Who would be out in this weather? The trail to his cabin was barely visible in daylight, let alone in a storm like this. He'd made sure of that, letting the forest reclaim most of the path, leaving just enough for his monthly supply runs. The knocking came again, more urgent now. Not the heavy pounding of a man's fist, but something lighter. Desperate, he stood slowly, joints protesting after hours of stillness. The floorboards creaked under his boots as he moved toward the door, hand still resting on the revolver's grip. Through the years of war and the lawless territories that followed, he'd learned to trust his instincts. And right now, every instinct screamed danger. But there was something else too. A pull he couldn't name, like a fishing line tugging at something deep in his chest. "Who's there?" His voice came out rough from disuse. Days could pass without him speaking to anything but his horse. No answer. Just the knocking again, weaker this time. Jacob lifted the heavy wooden bar that secured the door, his movements deliberate and careful. Whatever waited on the other side, he'd face it on his terms. The door swung inward on leather hinges, and the storm rushed in like a living thing, bringing with it the scent of pine, mud, and something else. Lavender soap, incongruous in this wilderness. She stood on his doorstep like an apparition from another world. Water streamed from dark hair that hung in tangled ropes around her shoulders. Her dress, once blue perhaps, clung to her frame, heavy with rain. But it was her eyes that held him, wide, dark, filled with a desperation that cut through his defenses like a blade through butter. "Please," she said, and her voice was barely above a whisper, competing with the storm. "Just for tonight?" The words hung between them, a request that seemed to carry more weight than its simplicity suggested. Jacob's mind cataloged details with the efficiency of a man who'd learned to read danger in small signs. No horse that he could see, boots caked with mud up to the ankles. She'd walked far. Her hands trembled, but not just from cold. Fear lived in every line of her body, and there, on her left wrist where the sleeve had pulled back, the purple-black bloom of bruises. "Ma'am," he started, but she swayed on her feet, one hand reaching out to steady herself against the door frame. "I won't be trouble," she said quickly. I can't." Her voice broke, and she glanced over her shoulder into the darkness beyond, a motion so filled with terror that Jacob found himself looking too, his hand tightening on his weapon. Nothing but rain and wind and the endless forest. But her fear was contagious, seeping into the air between them like fog. This was what he'd tried to escape. Complications, other people's problems, the messy entanglements of human need. He'd built these walls to keep the world out, and here it stood on his doorstep, soaked and shivering and asking for just one night. He could close the door, bar it again, let her find her way back down the mountain or to wherever she'd come from. It would be the smart thing, the safe thing, the thing the man he'd become would do. But something in her eyes, not just the fear, but the way she tried to hide it, the stubborn set of her jaw even as she trembled, reminded him of another time. Another woman who'd needed help and hadn't gotten it in time. "Come in," he heard himself say, stepping back. She didn't move immediately, as if she couldn't quite believe he'd agreed. Then she stumbled forward, and he caught her elbow to steady her. She flinched at the touch but didn't pull away. Inside, with the door barred again against the storm, she stood dripping on his floor, arms wrapped around herself. In the firelight, he could see her more clearly. Young, maybe 25, with the kind of beauty that would turn heads in any town. But there was damage there too, in the hollows under her eyes. The way she held herself like she expected a blow. "Fire's dying," he said unnecessarily, moving past her to add the log he'd ignored earlier. "I'll build it up. Thank you." The words were formal, carefully pronounced, as if she was trying to maintain some dignity despite her circumstances. Jacob busied himself with the fire, giving her space, giving himself time to think. What had he just done? 3 years of solitude, broken by 2 words. "Come in. There's a blanket in that chest," he said without turning. "Dry clothes, too. They'll be too big, but—" "Thank you," she said again. He heard the chest open, the rustle of fabric. When he finally turned, she'd wrapped the blanket around her shoulders, covering the wet dress. She stood closer to the fire now, close enough that steam began to rise from her clothes. "You got a name?" he asked. She hesitated, and he saw her throat work as she swallowed. "Elizabeth," she said finally. "Elizabeth Caldwell." A lie, most likely. The hesitation gave her away, and the name sounded practiced, like she'd rehearsed it. But Jacob understood lies. Sometimes they were all that kept you alive. "Jacob Thornton," he offered, surprising himself with the truth. She nodded, a ghost of a smile touching her lips before vanishing. "Mr. Thornton, I'm grateful. I know this is an imposition. Storm like this is no time to be wandering the mountain alone." He kept his voice neutral, not quite a question, but leaving room for explanation if she wanted to give it. She didn't. Instead, she moved to the window, peering out into the darkness. Her fingers gripped the blanket white-knuckled, and that telltale glance over the shoulder returned. Checking, watching, waiting for something, or someone. Jacob had seen that look before, in towns where women sometimes appeared with bruised faces and stories about walking into doors, where men with hard eyes and harder fists came looking for what they considered theirs. "Nobody's going to find this place in the storm," he said quietly. She turned from the window, and for a moment, her mask slipped. Raw hope flickered across her face before she shuddered it away. "I didn't mean—" "Coffee," he interrupted, not wanting to push her into explanations she wasn't ready to give. "It's been on the stove too long, but it's hot." "Yes, please." He poured 2 cups, the domestic normalcy of the action at odds with the tension thrumming through the cabin. When he handed her the cup, their fingers brushed, and she jerked back as if burned, coffee sloshing dangerously close to the rim. "Sorry," she breathed. "I'm sorry, I'm just jumpy as a spooked deer," he finished. "Seen plenty of those in my time." She studied him over the cup's rim as she took a careful sip. "You live here alone?" Not quite a question, but he nodded anyway. 3 years now. "By choice?" "Only kind of alone that works." Something shifted in her expression, a recognition perhaps. One damaged soul acknowledging another. The fire crackled between them, casting dancing shadows on the walls. Outside, the storm intensified, wind howling through the pines like a living thing. But inside the cabin, a different kind of storm was brewing. Jacob felt it in the air, in the way she kept glancing at the door, in the bruises she tried to hide. Trouble had found him despite his best efforts to avoid it. And for the first time in 3 years, he found he didn't entirely mind. The coffee cup trembled in her hands, creating tiny ripples across the dark surface. Jacob watched from his chair, noting how she held it with both hands like an anchor, something solid to cling to while the rest of her world seemed to be spinning away. The wet dress beneath the blanket had begun to steam more earnestly now, filling the cabin with the earthy smell of damp wool. "You should change out of those wet things," he said, keeping his voice carefully neutral. "Catch your death otherwise." She nodded, but made no move toward the clothes he'd indicated earlier. Instead, she took another sip of coffee, her eyes darting once more to the window. The gesture was becoming a rhythm: sip, glance, listen, repeat, like a deer at a water hole, ready to bolt at the first sign of danger. "Nobody can track in this weather," Jacob repeated, trying to ease the tension that radiated from her like heat from a stove. "Trail turns to mud soup in rain like this, even if someone knew where to look." "You don't know him," she whispered, so quietly he almost missed it under the storm's percussion. The words hung in the air between them, an admission that changed the shape of everything. Not lost then, running. Jacob felt the familiar tightness in his chest, the one that came with the prospect of violence. He'd thought himself done with it, but old habits died hard. "This him got a name?" He kept the question casual, like asking about the weather. Her laugh was bitter, barely more than an exhale. "Names? He's got plenty of those. Thomas Garrett when he's playing respectable. Tom when he's charming the ladies at church socials. But I've seen what he becomes when the door closes." She set the cup down on the table with shaking hands and pulled the blanket tighter. In the firelight, Jacob could see more bruises now. Fingerprints on her upper arms where the blanket had slipped, a fading yellow-green mark along her jawline that powder had probably hidden until the rain washed it away. "Your husband?" The word tasted sour in his mouth. "No." The denial came quick, fierce. "He wanted to be. Thought he owned me already anyway. Guess in his mind, the paperwork was just a formality." She moved away from the window finally, sinking into the chair across from him. The fire crackled between them, casting her face in shifting patterns of light and shadow. Up close, he could see she was younger than he'd first thought. 22, maybe 23. Too young to have those kinds of shadows in her eyes. "You from Cedar Ridge?" he asked. She shook her head. "Millbrook, 2 valleys over. Came there 6 months ago from back east. I thought it would be a fresh start. My aunt had passed, left me a little money. Enough to travel, start over somewhere new." Her voice turned rueful. "Should have kept going to California. Garrett from Millbrook, too. Owns half of it. General store, livery stable, has his fingers in the mine operations. When he sets his sights on something." She trailed off, but Jacob could fill in the rest. He'd known men like that. Men who thought money and power gave them rights to whatever they wanted. "First time was at church," she continued, surprising him with a confession. "All charm and manners. Brought me flowers, offered to show me around town. Everyone said how lucky I was, catching the eye of Thomas Garrett. Most eligible bachelor in 3 counties, they said." Jacob remained silent, letting her tell it at her own pace. Sometimes people needed to lance their wounds with words. For 2 months he was perfect, attentive, generous. Then one day I mentioned maybe taking a trip to Sacramento, visiting a cousin there. The mask slipped. Just for a moment, but I saw what was underneath. She touched her jaw unconsciously. Said I wasn't going anywhere. Said I belonged to him now, and it was time I understood that. "That when you ran?" "That was 3 weeks ago. I tried to leave proper-like, pack my things, take the stage. He had men at the depot, brought me back, said I needed to learn my place." Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. "I learned it all right. Learned what happens when you tell Thomas Garrett no." The fire popped, sending sparks up the chimney. Outside, thunder rolled across the mountains like divine judgment. Jacob felt the old rage building, the one he'd worked so hard to bury. Some men needed killing. He'd learned that truth in the war and confirmed it in the lawless years after. But he'd sworn off violence, sworn off getting involved in other people's troubles. So you ran again. Tonight, during the storm, figured it was my only chance. He had a business meeting, would be distracted. I slipped out the back of Mrs. Patterson's boarding house. She's his cousin, been keeping me there for my own good, she said. Elizabeth's laugh was hollow. Took nothing but what I'm wearing. Headed up the mountain because I remembered hearing about an old trapper's trail that led over to Cedar Ridge. In this weather, that trail's dangerous enough in daylight. Staying was more dangerous. She met his eyes then, fully, for the first time since she'd entered. I'd rather die on that mountain than live in a cage. Jacob understood that feeling. The desperate need for freedom, even if it came at the cost of everything else. It's what had driven him to this cabin, after all. How'd you find this place? Saw the smoke from your chimney just as the last light was failing. Almost missed it. You've hidden well, but I was desperate and... She gestured helplessly. Here I am, bringing my troubles to your door. You figure he'll come looking? Yes. No hesitation in that answer. He's probably already sent men out, storm or no storm. Thomas Garrett doesn't like losing his possessions. You're not a possession. Tell him that. She stood abruptly, moving to the window again. I should go. I've already stayed too long. If he finds me here... He won't. The words came out harder than Jacob intended, carrying an edge of promise that surprised them both. She turned to look at him, hope and skepticism warring in her expression. You don't know what you're saying. He has money, men, influence. You're just one man in a cabin. I've been one man before. Sometimes that's enough. Something in his tone must have convinced her, because she moved away from the window, though her shoulders remained tense. Why would you risk it? You don't know me. I'm nothing to you but trouble you didn't ask for. It was a fair question. One Jacob wasn't sure he could answer, even to himself. Maybe it was the bruises. Maybe it was the desperate courage it had taken to climb a mountain in a storm rather than submit. Maybe it was just that he was tired of being alone with his ghosts. Let's just say I've got my reasons, he said finally. Now, about those dry clothes. You're shivering. This time she nodded, moving toward the chest. Could you... Turn around. He turned his chair to face the fire, giving her privacy. The sounds of wet fabric hitting the floor, the rustle of dry clothes being pulled on. Such intimate noises in a space that had known only solitude for so long. When she spoke again, her voice was muffled, probably by fabric being pulled over her head. The shirt smells like cedar. Everything up here does eventually. Mountains get into things. It's nice, clean. When she told him he could turn around, she stood transformed. His work shirt hung on her like a tent, the sleeves rolled up several times. She'd kept her own undergarments, but traded the soaked dress for a pair of his canvas pants, held up with a length of rope. The sight should have been comical, but something about the way she stood, straighter now, chin raised, made it seem like armor. Better? Much. Thank you. She hesitated, then added, I can pay you. Not much, but keep your money. You'll need it when you get to wherever you're going. If I get there. You will. Again, that edge of promise he couldn't seem to keep from his voice. She studied him in the firelight. This strange man who lived alone on a mountain and made promises he had no business making. Who are you, Jacob Thornton, really? Just a man who prefers his own company. A man who knows how to handle trouble when it comes calling. He shrugged. Had my share. Done with it now. Are you? She gestured meaningfully at the Winchester by the door, the Colt on his hip. Men who are done with trouble don't usually keep their guns so close to hand. Habits, he said simply. Useful ones, maybe. The wind gusted against the cabin, rattling the windows in their frames. Somewhere in the forest, a tree branch cracked and fell with a crash that made Elizabeth jump. Her hand went to her throat, eyes wide, listening. Just the storm, Jacob said gently. Trees do that when they're heavy with rain. She nodded, but didn't relax. I keep thinking I hear horses, voices. Stupid, I know. Not stupid. Careful. There's a difference. Is there? Feels like I've been jumping at shadows for weeks now. Better to jump at shadows than not see the real threat coming. She returned to the chair, curling into it like she was trying to make herself smaller. The borrowed clothes emphasized how slight she was, how young. Yet there was steel in her too, hidden but present. It had taken steel to run into a storm rather than submit. "Tell me about this place," she said suddenly. "How does a man end up living alone on a mountain?" It was his turn to hesitate. But she'd shared her story, and fairness demanded something in return. Same way a woman ends up running through a storm, I suppose. Sometimes the world gets too heavy to carry, so you set it down and walk away. "And you've been walking for 3 years? Standing still, more like. Turns out you can't outrun what you're carrying inside. But you tried." "I tried." They sat in companionable silence then, two damaged souls sharing a fire while the storm raged outside. The coffee had gone cold, but neither moved to refresh it. There was something fragile in the moment, like a soap bubble that might burst if either of them moved too suddenly. Finally, Elizabeth spoke again, her voice soft. "I'll leave at first light. The storm should have passed by then, and trail will be washed out for days after a storm like this. Maybe longer. Then I'll find another way. I can't put you at risk any longer than Elizabeth." He used her chosen name deliberately, giving weight to it. "When that man comes, and we both know he will, he'll find more than he bargained for. Now get some rest. You're safe tonight." She looked like she wanted to argue, but exhaustion was winning. Her eyelids drooped despite her efforts to stay alert. "I haven't slept properly in weeks," she admitted. "Then sleep now. I'll keep watch. You can't stay awake all night. Done it before. Go on, take the bed. I'll be fine by the fire." This time she didn't argue, rising unsteadily. At the bedroom doorway, she paused. "Jacob? What you're doing? I won't forget it." "Just get some sleep," he said gruffly, uncomfortable with gratitude. As she disappeared into the other room, Jacob settled back in his chair, listening to the sounds of her preparing for bed. Soon, those sounds faded, replaced by the steady rhythm of exhausted sleep. He sat in the darkness, watching the fire die to embers, his hand never far from his gun. Somewhere out in that storm, a man named Thomas Garrett was probably discovering his captive had flown. Come morning, or maybe sooner, he'd be heading up the mountain with whoever he could muster. Men like Garrett didn't take well to being defied. Jacob smiled grimly. Let him come. It had been 3 years since he'd had a purpose beyond mere survival. 3 years of hiding from the world and himself. Maybe it was time to remember who he'd been before grief drove him to this mountain. Maybe it was time to remember that some fights were worth having. The fire had burned low again, casting long shadows across the cabin floor. Jacob added another log, watching the sparks spiral up the chimney like fleeing souls. It was past midnight now, the storm still hammering at the walls, but inside, a different kind of tension had settled. Elizabeth hadn't stirred from the bedroom in over an hour, her exhausted sleep so deep he could barely hear her breathing when he checked. He returned to his chair, but restlessness pulled at him. 3 years of solitude had given him too much time to think, and tonight the memories seemed closer than usual. He stood, moving to the window, peering out into the darkness. Nothing but rain and wind-tossed trees. Yet, a soft sound from the bedroom made him turn. Elizabeth stood in the doorway, his blanket wrapped around her shoulders, her face pale in the dim light. "Couldn't sleep?" he asked. "Tried. Every time I close my eyes, I see—" She shook her head. "May I sit with you a while?" He gestured to the chair across from his. She settled into it, pulling her knees up to her chest, making herself small again. For a moment they sat in silence, listening to the storm. "Tell me about him," Jacob said finally. "Garrett. What kind of man is he, really?" Elizabeth stared into the fire. "The kind who smiles while he hurts you, the kind who makes you doubt your own mind, your own worth. He's handsome, charming when he wants to be. Has this way of making you feel like you're the only person in the world when he looks at you, until you disappoint him. And then you learn what's behind the smile." Her hand moved unconsciously to her ribs. "He's careful, though. Nothing that shows where people might see. Nothing that can't be explained away. And always it's your fault. You made him do it. If only you'd been more grateful, more obedient, more... whatever he decided you should be that day." Jacob's jaw tightened. He'd known men like that in the war. Officers who used their rank to break men down, rebuild them into tools. "How long?" The real Thomas showed himself 3 weeks ago, but looking back, there were signs from the beginning. The way he'd show up wherever I went. How he always knew who I'd talked to, what I'd done. I thought it was romantic at first, that he was so interested in my life. Her laugh was bitter. Fool that I was. You're not a fool. Men like that, they're good at what they do. Practice, I reckon. She looked at him sharply. You sound like you know the type. Known a few, usually ended badly for them. Usually. He didn't elaborate, but she seemed to understand anyway. They sat quietly again, the fire crackling between them. Then Elizabeth spoke, her voice barely above a whisper. There were others before me. Women who left town suddenly or married quickly and moved away. Mrs. Patterson let it slip once when she'd had too much laudanum for her headaches. Said I should be grateful Thomas had chosen me, that the others hadn't appreciated what they had. What happened to them? I don't know. But there's a girl, Mary Sullivan, works at the boarding house. She goes quiet whenever his name comes up. Flinches when he walks by. I think she knows exactly what he is. She never said anything. Who would believe her? A servant girl against Thomas Garrett? Besides, she has a younger sister to think of. Depends on that job. Elizabeth's voice turned fierce. That's how men like him survive. They choose carefully. Women with no family, no connections, no one to ask questions if something happens. You have family back east? Had. Parents died of fever when I was 16. My aunt took me in, but she's gone now, too. I'm exactly what he was looking for. Alone, new in town, no one to protect me. She met his eyes. Except now there's you. I'm just a man with a cabin. No, she said softly. You're more than that. I can see it in how you move, how you watch. You fought before, killed before. It wasn't a question, but Jacob nodded anyway. War does that to a man. The war ended 10 years ago. Some wars don't end when the papers get signed. She studied him in the firelight. What was her name? The woman you lost? The question hit like a physical blow. Jacob's hand clenched on the arm of his chair. What makes you think? A man doesn't exile himself to a mountain for 3 years over abstract sorrows, and the way you looked when you saw my bruises, that was personal. Sarah. The name came out rough, unused. Her name was Sarah. Elizabeth waited, not pushing, just present. It was easier somehow, talking to a stranger in the dark, someone who had their own ghosts to carry. Met her after the war. I was drifting, taking work where I could find it, ranch hand mostly. Ended up at her father's spread outside Tucson. She was light. That's the only way I can describe it. Like sunshine given form. Smart, funny, kind. Saw something in me worth saving, though God knows what. You loved her, more than I knew was possible. We married in the spring of '72. Built a little house on the edge of her father's land. Had 2 good years. 2 perfect years. His voice caught. Then the fever came through. Took her in 3 days. Her and the baby she was carrying. Jacob, I'm so sorry. He shook his head, pushing back the memories. After that, I couldn't stay. Everywhere I looked, I saw her. So I drifted again, ended up here. Figured if I got far enough from people, maybe it would stop hurting. Did it? No, just got quieter. They sat with that truth between them. 2 people who understood that some wounds never fully healed. The storm outside seemed to ease slightly. The rain no longer driving quite so hard against the walls. I dream about her sometimes, Elizabeth said suddenly. A daughter I'll never have. Is that strange? To mourn something that never was? Not strange at all. We mourn the futures that get stolen from us just as much as the past. Thomas said he'd give me children. Said it like he was doing me a favor. Like I should be grateful for the chance to bear his offspring. Her voice turned hard. I told him I'd rather die childless than bring any son or daughter of his into the world. That's when he hit me the first time. Really hit me, not just grabbed too hard or shoved. Said I needed to learn respect. But you didn't learn what he wanted you to. No, I learned to be quiet, to plan, to wait for my chance. She pulled the blanket tighter. Mary helped in the end. Saw me preparing to run. Could have told him, gotten in his good graces. Instead, she created a distraction in the kitchen, gave me extra time to get away. Brave of her. Braver than me. She has to stay there, knowing what he is, what he might do if he finds out she helped. Jacob stood, moving to the stove to heat fresh coffee. The familiar motions helped settle his mind. As he worked, he spoke without turning. When I was in the cavalry, there was this sergeant. Mean as a rattlesnake, liked to use his fists on the new recruits. Command looked the other way. He got results, and that's all they cared about. One day, he went after this kid from Ohio. Skinny little thing. Couldn't have been more than 17. What happened? Kid fought back, surprised everyone, including the sergeant. Got him one good punch before the sergeant beat him unconscious. Jacob poured 2 cups, bringing one to Elizabeth. That night, the sergeant had an accident. Fell off his horse in the dark, broke his neck. Funny thing, his horse was still in the stable come morning. Elizabeth accepted the cup, understanding in her eyes. And the kid went on to make corporal, good soldier, once he didn't have to watch his back every minute. Sometimes accidents happen at convenient times. Sometimes they do. She sipped the coffee, then asked, "Is that what you're planning for Thomas? An accident?" "I'm not planning anything, just sharing old war stories." "Of course." But there was something in her voice now, a kind of grim satisfaction. "You know, he's afraid of heights. Thomas Garrett, who owns half the valley and thinks he's God's gift to creation, turns green at the edge of a cliff. Found that out when he tried to show me the view from Millbrook Point. Interesting detail. Probably not relevant to anything. Probably not. They were dancing around something dark, both knowing where the conversation led, but neither quite willing to name it. The storm provided cover, its noise masking their words from any ears but their own. "He'll come with men," Elizabeth said, returning to practical matters. "At least 3 or 4. The Hendricks brothers for certain. They do all his dirty work. Maybe that tracker he uses, Silas Worth. Man could follow a ghost through a graveyard. Let them come. Mountains have a way of evening odds. You can't fight them all. Don't plan to fight fair. Fair's for people who can afford to lose." She looked at him then with something that might have been hope. "You really mean it. You'll stand between me and them. Already decided that when I let you in. Man opens his door to trouble, he'd best be prepared to see it through. I'm not trouble, I'm a person. You're both. Nothing wrong with that. Best people usually are." That earned him a small smile, the first real one he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, showing the woman she might have been without Thomas Garrett's shadow over her life. "When this is over," she said, "I'm going to California, San Francisco maybe, start over where no one knows me. Good plan. Big city, lots of opportunities for a smart woman. You could come." The words tumbled out quickly, like she'd surprised herself by saying them. "I mean, after 3 years alone, maybe it's time." "Maybe," he said, though they both knew he wouldn't. This mountain was his penance, his self-imposed cell, but it was kind of her to offer. A branch cracked outside, closer than the earlier one. Both their heads snapped toward the sound. Jacob was on his feet instantly, moving to the window. Nothing but darkness and rain, but "There," Elizabeth breathed, pointing. "Did you see it? A light?" He had. Just for a moment, a flicker of lantern light through the trees, there and gone. Could have been lightning reflection, but Jacob's instincts said otherwise. "Get back to the bedroom," he said quietly, already moving toward his rifle. "Bar the door from inside." "Jacob, go! Now!" She went, but not before grabbing a kitchen knife from the table. Smart woman. Jacob checked his weapons, then doused the lantern, plunging the cabin into darkness save for the dying fire's glow. If someone was out there, no sense making himself an easy target. He waited, listening. The storm was definitely easing now, the rain settling into a steady patter, and underneath it, if he strained, he could hear something else. Horses, still distant, but coming closer. Thomas Garrett hadn't waited for dawn. The bastard was confident enough to climb a mountain in a storm, probably figuring his quarry would never expect pursuit so soon. Jacob smiled in the darkness. It was a predator's smile, one that would have worried anyone who saw it. Mr. Garrett was about to learn that some prey had teeth. The horses were closer now. 3, maybe 4. They'd have to leave them at the tree line. Trail got too narrow for mounts after that. That meant they'd come on foot for the last quarter mile. In the dark, in the mud. After riding through a storm, they'd be tired, Cold, probably angry. Good. Angry men made mistakes. Jacob positioned himself by the window, rifle ready. The first lesson of warfare: let your enemy come to you. The second lesson: make them regret it. Out in the darkness, Thomas Garrett was coming to reclaim what he thought was his. He had no idea he was walking into the home of a man who'd already lost everything once and had nothing left to lose but his ghosts. The storm was ending, but another kind of tempest was about to begin. The darkness pressed against the windows like a living thing, broken only by the occasional flicker of distant lantern light through the trees. Jacob remained motionless by the window, his breathing steady and controlled. Years of practice had taught him that stillness could be as powerful a weapon as any gun. The sounds were clearer now. Horses snorting, men's voices carrying on the wind. They were trying to be quiet, but the storm-soaked forest betrayed them. Every snapped twig, every squelch of boots in mud, announced their approach. From the bedroom came a soft scraping sound, Elizabeth pushing something heavy against the door. Good. She was thinking, preparing. The knife she'd taken would be little use against guns, but having it would make her feel less helpless, and sometimes that made all the difference. Jacob counted the voices. 4 distinct ones, maybe 5. More than he'd hoped, fewer than he'd feared. They'd stopped at the tree line just as he'd predicted. Now came the conference, the planning. He could imagine it. Garrett giving orders, his men reluctant to approach a cabin in the dark, not knowing what waited inside. A shadow moved across the window, barely visible against the night. Someone circling, trying to get a better view. Amateur mistake. Jacob shifted position slightly, keeping the wall between himself and the scout. Let them wonder. Uncertainty was another weapon in his arsenal. Minutes crawled by. The rain had softened to a drizzle, the storm moving on to trouble other mountains. In its wake came an eerie quiet, the kind that made every small sound seem amplified. A drop of water falling from the eaves, the settling of logs in the fireplace, Elizabeth's quick breathing from behind the bedroom door, then cutting through the silence like a blade. "Hello, the cabin?" The voice was cultured, confident, a voice used to being obeyed. Thomas Garrett had decided to try diplomacy first. Jacob didn't respond. Let the man talk to darkness. Let him wonder if anyone was even awake. "I know you're in there," Garrett continued. His voice carried that particular tone of a man trying to sound reasonable, while rage simmered underneath. "I'm looking for someone, a woman. Dark hair about yay high. She's confused. Not well. I'm worried about her safety in this storm." Still, Jacob remained silent. Through a gap in the shutters, he could see shapes moving. 3 men spreading out in a semicircle around the front of the cabin, smart enough not to bunch up then. That would make things more interesting. "Listen, friend," Garrett's voice came again, closer now. He'd moved up from the tree line. "I don't want any trouble. The woman, Elizabeth is her name. She's my fiancée. We had a misunderstanding. I just want to make sure she's safe. If she's there, if you've given her shelter from the storm, I'm grateful. There's a reward in it for you. $50 just for keeping her safe." Jacob almost smiled. $50 was more than most men saw in 2 months. Garrett was starting high, which meant he was either desperate or confident. Probably both. A floorboard creaked in the bedroom. Elizabeth had moved closer to the door, listening. He could imagine her fear, hearing that voice again. The voice that had whispered promises and threats in equal measure. "I'm going to come closer to the cabin now," Garrett announced. "Just to talk. I'm not armed." A lie. Jacob could see the bulge of a shoulder holster even in the darkness. But let him come. The closer the better. Boots on the porch steps. Heavy, deliberate. Garrett was making noise on purpose now, trying to seem non-threatening. One of his men had circled around to the left, another to the right. The third hung back, probably their shooter. Classical flanking maneuver. They'd done this before. 3 knocks on the door. Polite, civilized. "Please, sir, it's cold out here. Can we discuss this like gentlemen?" Jacob finally moved, but not to the door. He slipped through the shadows to the side window, peering out. The man on the left was pressed against the cabin wall, pistol drawn. Young, nervous. One of the Hendricks brothers Elizabeth had mentioned, probably. The one on the right was older, calmer. That would be Silas Worth, the tracker. He'd be the dangerous one. "Sir?" Garrett's voice was losing its polish. "I know someone's in there. Saw your smoke earlier. All I want is to collect my fiancée and leave. No harm to anyone." Thunder rumbled in the distance, the storm's parting shot. In its wake, Jacob finally spoke, pitching his voice to carry through the door. "No women here, just me." A pause. Then Garrett's voice, honey-sweet with false relief. "Ah, good. You're awake. Sorry to disturb you, Mr. Thornton. Mr. Thornton. Thomas Garrett's my name. Perhaps you've heard of me? I run several businesses down in Millbrook." "Never been to Millbrook." "Well, that explains it. Look, Mr. Thornton, I'm certain my fiancée came this way. We had witnesses see her heading up the mountain trail. In this storm, your cabin's the only shelter for miles. Surely you understand my concern?" "Said there's no woman here." Of course. But perhaps you could open the door. Let me look around, just to ease my mind. I'd make it worth your while. $100. Cash." The offer hung in the air. $100 was a fortune to a mountain hermit. Garrett was showing his hand now, revealing how badly he wanted Elizabeth back. "Door stays closed," Jacob said flatly. "You're welcome to water your horses at the trough and move on. Now, Mr. Thornton, that's not very neighborly." The false friendliness was fraying. "I've come all this way in a storm. Surely Christian charity demands—" "Don't recall inviting you. Don't recall being Christian either." Someone snickered, probably the younger Hendricks. A sharp word from Garrett silenced him. "I'm trying to be reasonable here," Garrett said, and now the mask was slipping. "But I will have what's mine, one way or another. Nothing here belongs to you. We'll see about that." Footsteps retreating from the porch. Garrett rejoining his men for another conference. Jacob used the moment to check the back window. No movement there yet, but they'd think of it soon enough. He moved back through the cabin, stopping at the bedroom door. "You all right in there?" "Yes." Her voice was steady, though he could hear the fear underneath. "Is he—" Still outside, trying to decide how badly he wants in. He wants in badly. He doesn't like being denied. Figured as much. You stay put no matter what you hear. "Jacob, promise me." "I promise." Back at the front window. The men had pulled back to the edge of the porch light. 4 of them now. Garrett must have kept one with the horses. They were arguing, voices low but gestures animated. The younger Hendricks kept pointing at the cabin, making shooting motions. His brother seemed to be counseling patience. Worth stood apart, studying the cabin with professional interest. And Garrett paced like a caged wolf, his civilized veneer cracking with each step. Finally, he strode back to the porch. "Last chance, Thornton. Open this door, let me collect my property, and we all go home safe. Otherwise—" "Otherwise what?" Jacob let amusement color his voice. "You'll huff and puff and blow my house down. You think you're funny. You think you're safe in there. But I own the law in 3 counties. When I tell them you kidnapped my fiancée, held her against her will, maybe did worse, well, they'll believe me. And mountain justice is harsh for men who interfere with women. Interesting story. Be more interesting if it were true. Truth is what I say it is. All pretense was gone now. This was the real Thomas Garrett, the man who thought money and power made him untouchable. Last chance. Open the door." "No." The word hung in the air like a challenge. For a moment, everything was still. Then Garrett's voice came again, cold as winter iron. "Worth, check the back. Hendricks boys, watch the windows. Anyone tries to leave, stop them. But I want the woman unharmed, understand? Not a scratch." "What about the man? That was the elder Hendricks." "I don't care what happens to him." Footsteps scattering. They were surrounding the cabin properly now. Jacob moved quickly but calmly, checking sight lines, angles. The cabin was solid, built to withstand winter storms and the occasional bear. But it wasn't a fort, and bullets had a way of finding gaps. A sound from the back. Worth trying the door there. Jacob had barred it earlier, and it would hold for a while. The windows were the weak points. Small, but big enough for a determined man to squeeze through if the shutters gave way. "Thornton," Garrett again. She's not worth dying for. Whatever she told you, whatever sob story she spun, it's lies. She's disturbed. Sees things that aren't there, makes wild accusations. I'm trying to help her. Seems like she don't want your help. She doesn't know what she wants. That's why she needs me, to protect her from herself. A bitter laugh came from the bedroom. Elizabeth had heard that. Jacob could imagine her rage at being talked about like a child, a possession, a thing without will or reason. Glass shattered. The side window. Young Hendricks getting impatient. Jacob moved, but not toward the broken window. Instead, he positioned himself where he could cover both front and side approaches. Let them think he was panicking, running to each threat. "That was stupid, boy!" Garrett's voice sharp with anger. "I said no damage." "Just trying to flush him out, Mr. Garrett." "Well, don't try. Just do what I tell you." More sounds from the back. Worth was working on the door, probably with some kind of pry bar. The man knew his business. That door would hold, but not forever. "Elizabeth," Garrett called out suddenly. "I know you're in there. Whatever this man has told you, whatever he's promised, it's not real. You belong with me. You know that. Deep down, you know I'm the only one who truly cares about you." Silence from the bedroom. "Good girl. Don't let him bait you." "Think about Mary Sullivan," Garrett continued, his voice taking on a nasty edge. "Poor Mary. All alone now that her sister's taken ill. Such a tragedy, that fever going around. Be a shame if she caught it too." A sharp intake of breath from the bedroom. The threat wasn't subtle. Harm to the girl who'd helped her escape. "That's the kind of man you are," Jacob called out. "Threatening servant girls? I don't threaten, Thornton. I make promises, and I keep them." The pry bar at the back door was making progress. Wood splintered. Not long now. Jacob made a decision. "Garrett, your man at the back door. Worth, is it? Tell him to step away. Now. Or what?" Instead of answering, Jacob fired. Not at anyone. He put the bullet through the wall, high, right where Worth would be standing. The sound was deafening in the enclosed space. Outside, someone cursed and scrambled away from the door. "Next one won't be a warning," Jacob said calmly, already reloading. "You just made a big mistake," Garrett snarled. "Boys, take this place apart." And then the night exploded. Gunfire erupted from 3 directions at once, muzzle flashes lighting up the darkness like deadly fireflies. Jacob dropped low, pulling the heavy table over for cover as bullets punched through the cabin walls, showering him with splinters. The shutters on the broken window exploded inward, and he saw young Hendricks trying to climb through. The Winchester spoke once, and Hendricks tumbled backward with a cry. Not dead, Jacob had aimed for the shoulder, but out of the fight. His brother screamed curses, increasing his rate of fire. "Hold your fire!" Garrett's voice cut through the chaos. "Hold, damn you!" The shooting stopped, leaving Jacob's ears ringing. Gun smoke hung heavy in the air, mixing with the smell of wet earth and fear. "That was one of my men you shot, Thornton. He was climbing through my window. Man's got a right to defend his home. You're outnumbered 4-1. 3-1 now, and I've got plenty of ammunition." It was partly bluff. He had maybe 30 rounds total between the rifle and his Colt. But they didn't know that. From the bedroom came a crash. Elizabeth had pushed something else against the door, the dresser, by the sound of it. Smart. If they got past him, that barricade might buy her time to escape through the window. "Mr. Garrett," Worth's voice, calm and professional. "The boy's bleeding bad, needs a doctor. Then get him to 1. That's 2 hours riding if we push hard. He might not make it." Jacob could hear the wounded Hendricks moaning. The sound tugged at something in him. He'd heard too many boys make those sounds in field hospitals and battlefield ditches. But he pushed the sympathy aside. They'd come here with violence in mind. "Take him and go," Jacob called out. "No one else needs to bleed tonight." "You think I'm leaving?" Garrett's laugh was ugly. "You shot one of my men. That's attempted murder. When the sheriff gets here..." "The sheriff can sort it out in daylight. For now, get that boy to a doctor before he bleeds out on my porch." Urgent whispers outside. Then the elder Hendricks spoke up, voice thick with emotion. "Mr. Garrett, he's my brother. I need to get him help." "Fine, take him. But you come right back, understand? With the sheriff and a posse." "Yes, sir." Sounds of movement, groaning, horses being brought up. 1 down, but that still left 3. And now they'd be angry as well as determined. "You're just postponing the inevitable," Garrett said once the hoofbeats faded. "When Hendricks comes back with the law—" "Your bought law, you mean?" "My law. Same thing in these parts." "Maybe, maybe not. Sheriff might take a different view when he hears how you came up here in the dead of night throwing lead at a man's home. Might wonder what you were so eager to collect that couldn't wait for daylight and proper procedure." Silence. Jacob had hit a nerve. Even bought lawmen had limits, and Garrett's midnight raid was far outside legal bounds. "Elizabeth," Garrett tried again, his voice shifting to that false sweetness. "This has gone too far. Someone's been hurt because of your selfishness. Is that what you want? More blood on your hands?" "Don't listen to him," Jacob said, loud enough for her to hear. "Nothing that happens here is on you." "Ah, so she is there. Thank you for confirming that, Thornton." The satisfaction in Garrett's voice was nauseating. "Elizabeth, darling, please, come out. We'll go home. Forget this ever happened. I'll even forgive you for this indiscretion." Still silence from the bedroom, but Jacob could feel her listening, could sense her struggle between fear and guilt. "Think about Mary," Garrett continued, playing his ace. "Poor sweet Mary. She helped you, didn't she? And now she'll pay for it, unless you come out. Right now." "You bastard!" The words exploded from the bedroom, Elizabeth's control finally breaking. "You evil, twisted bastard. There's my girl. I was wondering when that fire would show itself. Come out, and we'll discuss Mary's future somewhere more comfortable. I'd rather die. That can be arranged too." The threat hung in the air like smoke. Jacob had heard enough. "Garrett, you want to negotiate? You negotiate with me. Leave her out of it. What could you possibly have to negotiate with? How about this? You and your men clear off my land, and I don't put a bullet in you the next time you show your face at my door." Worth spoke up then, his tracker's instincts probably telling him something was off. "Mr. Garrett, might be wise to wait for daylight. Man's got good position, knows the ground, and that storm's washed out our tracks. Be hard to prove anything come morning." I don't care about proof." "You will if this goes badly. Dead men tell no tales, but wounded ones sing like birds. Young Hendricks is going to have to explain that shoulder to someone." It was good advice, professionally given. Jacob grudgingly respected the tracker for it, but Garrett was beyond reason now, his obsession burning hotter than logic. "Then we smoke them out. This cabin's wood, isn't it? Wood burns." "Mr. Garrett." Worth's voice held a warning note. "You object, Worth?" "Seems excessive, sir, and there's the woman to think of." "The woman made her choice when she ran. If she burns with her protector, that's on her head." Even in the darkness, Jacob could feel the shift in atmosphere. Worth might be a hired gun, but he had lines he wouldn't cross. Burning a woman alive was apparently one of them. "I didn't sign on for that," the tracker said quietly. "Then leave, but you don't get paid." A long pause, then footsteps moving away. Worth was walking, not running, maintaining his dignity even in retreat. That left Garrett and whoever the fourth man was, probably another hired gun with fewer scruples. "So it's down to you and one man," Jacob called out. "Not great odds for burning out an armed defender." "Shut up!" Garrett's composure was completely gone now. "Jennings, get the kerosene from the horses." So the fourth man was Jennings. Jacob searched his memory. The name was vaguely familiar. A gun for hire out of Amarillo, if he recalled right. Mean as a snake and twice as dangerous. "Jacob?" Elizabeth's voice closer now. She'd moved to the door. "They can't really—" "They can try. You still got that knife?" "Yes." "Good. Listen close. If this goes bad, you go out the bedroom window, head straight back into the trees, then cut left toward the ridge. Half a mile up, there's a cave. Small opening, but it goes back deep. You hide there until full daylight, then make for Cedar Ridge. Don't stop for anything, understand? I'm not leaving you. You will if I tell you to. Promise me." "Jacob, promise. I promise." Footsteps on the porch again. The acrid smell of kerosene drifted through the broken window. They were really going to try it. "Last chance, Thornton." Garrett sounded almost gleeful now, drunk on his own power. "Send her out, or burn with her." Jacob weighed his options. The cabin would burn fast once lit. The logs were old, seasoned by years of mountain weather. But fire was unpredictable. dangerous to everyone nearby, and Garrett would have to get close to set it. You burn this cabin, you burn any chance of taking her alive, Jacob pointed out. That what you want? Your precious Elizabeth turned to ash. If I can't have her, no one can. The words revealed everything. This wasn't about love or possession anymore. It was about pride, control, the inability to accept rejection. Garrett would rather see Elizabeth dead than free. From the bedroom came a sound that broke Jacob's heart. Quiet sobbing. Not from fear, he realized, but from the final understanding of what she'd escaped. What kind of monster she'd nearly tied herself to. You hear that, Garrett? You made her cry? That make you feel like a big man? She'll cry more before I'm done. Light it up, Jennings. The smell of kerosene grew stronger. They were splashing it on the walls, the porch. Once lit, the cabin would go up like a torch. Jacob made his decision. He moved to the door, lifted the bar, and kicked it open in one motion, diving low and to the right. Jennings stood on the porch with a torch, frozen in surprise. Jacob's Colt boomed twice, and Jennings spun away, the torch flying from his hand to gutter out in the mud. Garrett's gun cleared leather, but Jacob was already rolling, using the porch pillars for cover. A bullet sparked off stone where his head had been. Then he was up, moving, the Winchester tracking toward Garrett's muzzle flash. The two men faced each other in the flickering light of the dropped lantern, weapons raised, fingers on triggers. A Mexican standoff, they called it in the border towns. First to flinch died. You're fast, Garrett admitted, his cultured voice at odds with the wild look in his eyes. But you're still just one man. One's enough, if he's the right man. You'd die for her? A woman you just met? I'd die for the principle of it. Man's got a right to choose his own path. Woman, too. Noble words. Let's see if you bleed noble blood. Garrett's finger tightened on the trigger. So did Jacob's. In another heartbeat, one or both would be dead. Then Elizabeth's voice cut through the tension like a blade. No, She stood in the doorway, still clutching the kitchen knife, her face pale but determined in the lantern light. No more killing. Not for me. Elizabeth. Garrett's voice went soft, almost wondering. Darling, you came out. I'm not your darling. I'm not your anything. She stepped onto the porch, placing herself between the two men. I'll come with you, Thomas, but only if you leave Mr. Thornton alone. No law, no retribution. You got what you came for. Elizabeth, no. Jacob kept his rifle trained on Garrett. You don't have to. Yes, I do. She turned to him, and he saw the defeat in her eyes. He'll never stop. He'll burn this cabin, bring the law, destroy anyone who helps me. I won't have your death on my conscience. That's my girl, Garrett said, triumph making him magnanimous. Always seeing sense in the end. Lower your weapon, Thornton. You heard the lady. Jacob didn't move. Every instinct screamed against it. Letting her go back to that monster. Please, Elizabeth whispered. You gave me one night of feeling safe. That's more than I hoped for. Don't throw your life away for someone you barely know. Seems to me a life's worth throwing away if it's for the right reason. Not for me. I'm not worth it. That's where you're wrong. They stood frozen in tableau, the woman with her knife, the men with their guns, the night holding its breath around them. Then, slowly, Elizabeth walked toward Garrett. Each step looked like it cost her, but she kept moving. That's it, Garrett crooned. Come home where you belong. She stopped just out of his reach. First your word. You won't harm Mr. Thornton? Not now, not later. Swear it. I swear, Garrett said easily. Too easily. On your mother's grave. His face darkened. Don't push me, woman. Swear it, or I run. And this time, I'll make sure you never find me. A long moment. Then, through gritted teeth. I swear on my mother's grave, Thornton goes free. Elizabeth nodded and took the final step. Garrett's hand closed on her arm, possessive, triumphant. She didn't flinch, but Jacob saw her die a little inside. Drop the rifle, Thornton. We're leaving. Jacob held position. She goes gentle, Garrett. I see one bruise on her, hear one story about mistreatment, and that oath won't mean spit to me. Threatening me? You're in no position? The Winchester's barrel shifted slightly, centered on Garrett's chest. I've got nothing left to lose. Remember that. You harm her, and I'll come off this mountain. You won't see me coming, but you'll see me at the end. That's my oath. Something in Jacob's voice must have penetrated, because Garrett nodded slowly. She'll be treated like a queen. Come, Elizabeth. Time to go home. They moved toward the horses, Garrett's grip never loosening on Elizabeth's arm. At the tree line, she looked back once. In the dim light, Jacob saw her lips move. "Thank you," she mouthed silently. Then they were gone, swallowed by the darkness. Jacob stood on his porch, rifle still raised, until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely. Only then did he lower the weapon and sink onto the steps. The night pressed in around him, no longer held at bay by danger and adrenaline. His cabin stood intact but violated, windows broken, walls scarred by bullets. The smell of kerosene lingered like a threat, but worse than any physical damage was the silence. For a few hours, the cabin had held life, conversation, connection. Now it was just walls again, and he was just a man sitting alone in the dark. Somewhere down the mountain, Elizabeth was riding back to her cage, and Jacob, for all his guns and promises, had let her go. The storm was over, but its aftermath stretched before him like an accusation. He'd failed her, just as he'd failed Sarah. Some protector he'd turned out to be. But as he sat there, something else stirred beneath the guilt. A cold, patient anger. Garrett might have won this round, but the game wasn't over. Men like that always pushed too far eventually. And when they did, Jacob Thornton would be waiting. The mountains had taught him patience. Now they would teach Thomas Garrett the price of broken oaths. The fire had been rebuilt, flames casting dancing shadows across the bullet-scarred walls. Jacob sat in his chair, a cup of cold coffee forgotten in his hands. Elizabeth's cup still sat on the table where she'd left it, a tangible reminder of her presence. He couldn't bring himself to wash it away just yet. Outside, the night had gone quiet. The storm's aftermath left the forest dripping and hushed, as if the very trees mourned what had transpired. Through the broken window came the scent of wet pine and something else, her lavender soap, still lingering faintly in the air. He should board up the windows, clean up the broken glass, erase the evidence of violence. Instead, he sat, thinking, remembering, the way she'd stood between him and Garrett's gun, willing to sacrifice herself. The defeat in her eyes as she walked away. A sound made him look up. Footsteps on the porch, light, hesitant. His hand moved to his gun, then froze. He knew those footsteps. Jacob? She stood in the doorway like a ghost, soaked again, but from dew this time, not rain. Her face was pale, eyes wide with something between fear and determination. The dress Garrett had surely made her change back into was torn at the hem, mud-stained from hard travel. "Elizabeth." He was on his feet without conscious thought. "How? I ran." The words tumbled out in a rush. "When we got to the bottom of the mountain, he sent Worth's replacement ahead to town to spread his version of events. Just him and me and Jennings was hurt, slowing us down. When we stopped to rest the horses, I hit Thomas with a rock, took his horse and ran." "You hit him?" A ghost of a smile touched her lips. "Hard. He went down like a sack of grain. Jennings was too surprised to stop me." "He'll come after you." "I know. That's why I came back. I couldn't leave things like that. Walking away, pretending to submit, that's not who I want to be anymore." Jacob moved toward her, noting the way she swayed on her feet. Exhaustion, fear, and something else. A kind of desperate courage that took his breath away. "You should sit," he said gently. "You're about to fall over." She let him guide her to the chair, sinking into it with a sigh. "I must be mad coming back here. He'll look here first. Maybe, or maybe he'll think you're too smart to return to the obvious place." "I'm not smart. If I were smart, I'd never have believed his lies in the first place." Her voice turned bitter. Sweet, trusting Elizabeth. So eager for love she couldn't see the monster behind the mask. "Stop that." The sharpness in his voice made her look up. "You trusted someone. That's not a weakness. The weakness is his, not yours." She studied his face in the firelight. "You really believe that?" "I know it. Spent too many years blaming myself for things that weren't my fault. Won't watch you do the same." "What did you blame yourself for?" The question hung between them. Jacob returned to his chair, weighing his words. The night seemed to call for truth, for the sharing of burdens too heavy to carry alone. "Not seeing the fever coming," he said finally. "Sarah started feeling poorly on a Tuesday. I thought it was just tiredness. She'd been working hard, getting the garden ready for winter. By Thursday, she was burning up. I rode for the doctor, but he was drunk, useless. By the time I found another one 2 towns over, it was too late." He nodded. "She was gone when I got back. Her father was with her, said she called for me at the end, said she understood, that she loved me." His voice roughened. 3 years, and I still hear her calling." Elizabeth reached across the space between them, her hand covering his. She was lucky to have someone who loved her that much. Was she? I couldn't save her. Couldn't protect her from something as simple as fever. You can't protect people from everything. Trust me, I've learned that. Thomas promised to protect me too, at first. From the harsh world, from difficult decisions, from everything except himself. She squeezed his hand. At least your protection came from love, not the need to control. They sat in silence, hands linked, sharing the weight of old pain. The fire crackled, and outside an owl called, life returning to normal after the night's violence. "Tell me about her," Elizabeth said softly. "Not the ending. Tell me about the life you built together." So he did. Words he hadn't spoken in 3 years poured out. Sarah's laugh, like church bells on a clear morning. The way she hummed while she cooked, always slightly off-key. Her fierce defense of a homeless dog that became their constant companion. The dreams they'd shared. Children, a bigger house, maybe a trip to San Francisco to see the ocean. "She sounds wonderful," Elizabeth said when he finally ran dry. "She was, and she'd have liked you." "You think so?" "No, so. She had a soft spot for fighters, said the world needed more people willing to stand up for themselves." Elizabeth's laugh was rueful. "I don't feel like much of a fighter. I ran, twice. Running's not always cowardice. Sometimes it's the smartest kind of fighting there is. And you came back. That takes a different kind of courage. Or foolishness. Maybe they're the same thing sometimes." She smiled then, a real smile that transformed her tired face. "Maybe they are." A branch cracked outside, and both tensed. But it was just the forest settling, nature reclaiming its peace. Still, it reminded them that dawn was coming, and with it, decisions. "What now?" Elizabeth asked. "I can't stay here. I won't bring more trouble to your door." "Seems to me trouble's already been here. Question is what we do about it." "We?" She looked at him with something like hope. "You don't owe me anything, Jacob. You've already done more than—" "Stop." He leaned forward, meeting her eyes. "You want to run? I'll help you run. You want to fight? I'll stand with you. But you don't face this alone. Not anymore." "Why?" The word was barely a whisper. "Why would you risk everything for someone you met just hours ago?" He thought about it, searching for words to explain what he barely understood himself. "Maybe because for 3 years I've been dead inside, just going through the motions. Tonight, for the first time since Sarah died, I felt alive. Scared, angry, but alive. You did that. I brought violence to your home. You brought purpose. There's a difference." She was crying now, silent tears tracking down her cheeks. "I don't know what to do. He'll never stop. Even if I run to California, he'll follow. Men like Thomas don't accept rejection." "Then maybe running's not the answer." "What else is there?" Jacob stood, moving to the window. Dawn was beginning to gray the eastern sky, painting the mountains in shades of pearl and shadow. Their standing ground, making him come to you on your terms, not his. "How?" "He swore an oath not to harm me, on his mother's grave." "You think he'll honor it?" "No. Men like that, oaths are just words. But it gives us time. He'll want to make it look legal, justified. That means witnesses, official cause." He turned back to her. "You said he owns the law in 3 counties. But there's always someone higher. Federal marshals, territorial judges, someone who can't be bought. And if there isn't, then we make our own justice." The words settled between them like a covenant. Elizabeth rose, moving to stand beside him at the window. "You're talking about killing him. I'm talking about ending a threat. Whether that's through law or lead depends on him. I don't want you to become a killer for me. Too late for that. War made me a killer. Sarah's death made me a hermit. Maybe it's time to find out what else I can be." She slipped her hand into his, and they stood watching the dawn break over the mountains. The storm had washed the air clean, and everything seemed sharper, more defined. A new day, with new possibilities. "There's something else," Elizabeth said quietly. "Something I didn't tell you about Thomas." Jacob waited, feeling her gather courage. "He's sick. In the head, I mean. His mother died when he was young, badly. Fell down the stairs, he said, but his father drank and had a temper. Thomas was there when it happened. 8 years old, watching his mother die while his father stood over her. That's why the oath meant something. Part of him, anyway. The part that's still that 8-year-old boy. But the rest of him..." She shuddered. "Sometimes, when he looked at me, it wasn't me he was seeing. It was her. He'd call me by her name, Margaret. Tell me I couldn't leave him like she did. All the more reason to stop him. Man, that broken won't stop with you." "No, Mary Sullivan wasn't the first. Won't be the last." She turned to face him fully. "So what do we do?" "First, we get you somewhere safe. Not here. He'll come back, oath or no oath. I know a place, an old line shack about 5 miles up the mountain. Hasn't been used in years, but it's solid. We hole up there, make plans. And then we find out just how much Thomas Garrett's money can buy and what it can't." He squeezed her hand. "You game for that?" "I'm terrified," she admitted. "But yes, I'm done running, done being afraid. Fear's all right, keeps you sharp. It's what you do with it that matters." The sun cleared the mountain peaks, flooding the cabin with golden light. It illuminated the damage from the night's violence, but also something else. 2 people who'd found each other in the darkness, preparing to face whatever came next. "I should get some things together," Jacob said. "Food, ammunition, supplies. You should rest while—" "Jacob." She stopped him with a hand on his arm. "Before we go any further, I need you to know something. Whatever happens, whether we succeed or fail, live or die, this night mattered. You mattered. For the first time in months, I remembered who I was before Thomas tried to remake me. You gave me that." "Elizabeth." "No, let me finish. I'm not asking for promises or declarations. We barely know each other. But I wanted you to know that if something happens, if this goes badly, I'm glad it was you who opened that door. Glad it was you who stood between me and him." He covered her hand with his. "Nothing's going to happen to you. I failed someone once. Won't fail again. You didn't fail Sarah. And you haven't failed me. Whatever comes next, remember that." They stood there as the sun climbed higher, 2 damaged souls preparing for war. Outside, horses were coming up the trail. Not stealthy this time, but loud, announcing their presence. "Sounds like round 2, Jacob said calmly, checking his rifle. "Together?" Elizabeth asked. "Together." As the riders approached, they took their positions. Whatever Thomas Garrett had planned, he'd find them ready. The night of running was over. The day of reckoning had begun. The morning mist clung to the pines like ghostly fingers as 3 riders emerged from the forest. Jacob recognized the lead horse first, a black stallion with a white blaze, Thomas Garrett's pride and joy. The man himself sat tall in the saddle, his fine clothes somewhat worse for wear, a dark bruise blooming on his left temple where Elizabeth's rock had found its mark. Flanking him were 2 men Jacob didn't recognize. Not locals, by their bearing. Hired guns from further afield, probably brought in after last night's debacle. They rode with the easy confidence of professionals, hands never far from their weapons. "That's far enough," Jacob called from the porch, rifle visible but not directly aimed. Beside him, Elizabeth stood straight despite the tremor he could feel running through her. Garrett raised a hand, and the riders stopped at the edge of the clearing. In the morning light, his face was a study in controlled rage, the civilized mask barely holding. "Miss Caldwell," he said, ignoring Jacob entirely. "That was quite the performance last night. I trust you've gotten it out of your system?" "I'm not going back with you, Thomas." Her voice carried across the clearing, steady and clear. "Of course you are. Where else would you go? You have no money, no family, no friends, except those I've allowed you. You need me, Elizabeth. You've always needed me. I needed the man I thought you were. That man never existed." Something flickered across Garrett's face. Pain, perhaps, or just wounded pride. I am exactly who I've always been. A man who knows what he wants and takes it. You used to admire that about me. I was fooled by it. There's a difference." The two hired guns exchanged glances, clearly uncomfortable with the domestic drama playing out before them. The one on the left, a weathered man with a silver at his temples, spoke up. "Mr. Garrett, perhaps we should—" Silence. Garrett didn't even look at him. "Elizabeth, I'm going to make this very simple. You come with me now, voluntarily, and all is forgiven. This incident never happened. Mr. Thornton violated no laws, suffered no consequences. Life goes on as it should. And if I refuse?" Garrett's smile was cold as winter frost. "Then I'm afraid Mr. Thornton has been harboring a fugitive. You see, I've already filed papers with the sheriff. You're officially a ward of the court, deemed mentally incompetent, prone to delusions and violence. I'm your legal guardian, responsible for your welfare." "That's a lie." Elizabeth stepped forward, but Jacob caught her arm. "Easy," he murmured. "Let him talk. Give him enough rope." "Oh, it's all quite legal," Garrett continued, producing a folded document from his coat. "Judge Harwick signed it yesterday. Amazing how quickly these things can be arranged when one knows the right people. So, you see, Mr. Thornton here is technically breaking the law by keeping you from your appointed guardian. Assuming that paper's real," Jacob said calmly. "Assuming Judge Harwick had proper cause to sign it. Assuming a lot of things that might not hold up under close examination." Garrett's eyes narrowed. "You're playing a dangerous game, Thornton. Seems to me you're the one playing games. Legal guardian. She's a grown woman, sound of mind. Any fool can see that." Can they? A woman who attacks her fiancé with a rock, who runs into a storm, raving about persecution, who seeks shelter with a stranger, placing both their lives at risk. These are not the actions of a rational person. "They're the actions of someone trying to escape a monster," Elizabeth said quietly. The word hung in the morning air like a challenge. Garrett's face darkened, his hand moving toward his coat. The hired guns tensed, professional instincts kicking in. "Careful, Miss Caldwell. Slander is also a crime. Truth isn't slander. You're sick, Thomas, twisted by what happened to your mother, trying to control every woman who comes near you because you couldn't save her. Don't," the word came out as a snarl. "Don't you dare speak of her." "Why not? You spoke of her plenty. Called me by her name when you—" She stopped, trembling. "When I what?" His voice had gone soft, dangerous. "What lies are you spreading now? The truth, about what you do behind closed doors, about the other women who've disappeared, about Mary Sullivan and why she's so frightened." "Enough." Garrett's composure finally shattered. He swung down from his horse, stride aggressive as he approached the porch. "You need help, Elizabeth. You're confused, telling stories, but I'll fix you. I'll make you well again." Jacob stepped forward, rifle shifting. "That's close enough. Or what? You'll shoot me in front of witnesses? Add murder to your crimes? Won't be murder if you're threatening the lady." "I'm trying to help her." "No." Elizabeth's voice cut through their confrontation. "You're trying to own me, but I'm not property, Thomas. I'm not your mother, and I'm not going to let you turn me into her. You know nothing about my mother." "I know she died at the bottom of the stairs. I know you were there. I know you blame yourself, and maybe you should. Maybe if you'd been stronger, braver, you could have stopped him." Garrett went white. "Shut your mouth. Is that what you tell yourself? That controlling women keeps them safe? That hurting them is really protecting them? Your father told himself the same lies, didn't he?" "I said shut up!" He lunged for the porch, all pretense of civilization gone. Jacob moved to intercept, but Elizabeth was faster. The knife she'd kept hidden flashed in the morning sun, slicing across Garrett's reaching hand. He reeled back with a cry, blood dripping between his fingers. "You cut me! You crazy bitch, you cut me!" The hired guns had drawn their weapons but seemed unsure what to do. This wasn't what they'd been paid for. Domestic disputes that turned bloody were dangerous ground for men who lived by reputation. "Mr. Garrett," the older one said carefully, "might be time to withdraw. Regroup." The lady's made her position clear. "Clear?" Garrett laughed, high and wild. "Oh, she's made it clear all right. Clear that she's exactly what I said. Violent, delusional, dangerous. Thank you, Elizabeth. You've just proven my case. He wrapped his bleeding hand with a handkerchief, movements sharp with barely controlled rage. When he looked up, his eyes held something that made Jacob's blood run cold. Not just anger anymore, but a kind of triumphant madness. Did you see that, gentleman? She attacked me, unprovoked. A clear sign of her mental instability. He turned to the hired guns. You'll swear to that, won't you? For an extra 100 each. The men exchanged glances. The younger one shrugged. Sure, Mr. Garrett, whatever you say. But the older one holstered his gun. I don't lie for money, Garrett. Find someone else for your games. He turned his horse. I'm done here. You walk away. You don't get paid. Already figured that. Some money ain't worth earning. He touched his hat to Elizabeth. Ma'am, good luck to you. As he rode off, Garrett's face contorted with rage. Fine, I don't need him. I have what I need. Evidence of assault, a legal guardianship. And soon, very soon, I'll have you back where you belong, Elizabeth. Over my dead body, Jacob said quietly. That can be arranged. Oh, not by me. I gave my word, didn't I? But you've made enemies now, Thornton. Harboring fugitives, threatening lawful recovery efforts. The sheriff will have questions. Hard questions. His smile was all teeth. And sometimes prisoners try to escape. Tragic when that happens. The threat was clear. Jacob felt Elizabeth tense beside him, ready to speak, but he squeezed her shoulder in warning. Get off my land, Garrett, now. Gladly, but this isn't over. You've chosen your side, Thornton. Remember that when the consequences come calling? He mounted his horse awkwardly, favoring his injured hand. Enjoy your time together. It won't last long. The remaining hired gun looked uncomfortable, but followed as Garrett spurred his horse back toward the trail. At the tree line, Garrett turned back. She'll come crawling back, he called. They always do, and when she does, I'll be waiting. I'm a patient man, Thornton. I can wait forever if need be. Then you'll be waiting a long time, Elizabeth called back. Because I'd rather die free than live in your cage. Garrett's face twisted, but he said nothing more. The sound of hoofbeats faded into the forest, leaving behind a silence that felt both victorious and ominous. Elizabeth sagged against Jacob, the knife falling from nerveless fingers. I cut him. I actually cut him. You defended yourself, nothing more. He'll use it against me. Say I'm violent, unstable, everything he claimed. Let him. His word against ours. His word carries weight. Mine carries nothing. Jacob turned her to face him. Then we make your word count. There's always someone higher up the chain, someone who can't be bought. We just need to find them. And until then, we prepare. He showed his hand today. Fake guardianship papers, hired witnesses. Man's getting desperate, making mistakes, or getting more dangerous. That too. He picked up the fallen knife, wiping the blood on his pants before handing it back to her. You did good. Stood your ground. I was terrified. But you stood anyway. That's what matters. She looked at the knife, then at the blood drops on the porch. I've never hurt anyone before. Never thought I could. Sometimes we surprise ourselves when pushed. Question is, can you do it again if needed? She met his eyes, and he saw steel there alongside the fear. To stay free? Yes, I can do whatever it takes. Then we'd best get moving. That line shack I mentioned, we need to get there before Garrett comes back with reinforcements. You think he will? I think he's not done. Men like that, they escalate when challenged. We need to be ready for whatever comes next. They gathered supplies quickly. Food, ammunition, blankets, medical supplies. Elizabeth helped, moving with new purpose, the morning's confrontation having burned away some of her fear. As they prepared to leave, she paused at the door. You're home, she said softly. I've brought nothing but trouble to it. It's just walls and a roof. Home's what you carry inside. He shouldered his pack. Besides, it needed airing out. 3 years of ghosts make for stale air. She smiled at that, small but genuine. Then let's go make some fresh trouble elsewhere. As they headed up the mountain trail, Jacob looked back once at his cabin. For 3 years it had been his sanctuary, his prison. Now it was just a building, one he might or might not return to. The future stretched ahead, uncertain and dangerous, but he found he didn't mind. For the first time in years, he had something worth fighting for. Someone worth protecting. And if Thomas Garrett wanted a war, well, Jacob Thornton had fought those before. This time, he intended to win. Dawn broke clear and bright over the mountains, painting the peaks in shades of gold and rose. The line shack sat sturdy against a backdrop of pines, smoke rising from its chimney into the crisp morning air. 3 weeks had passed since that violent night at Jacob's cabin. 3 weeks of watching, waiting, planning. Elizabeth stood on the small porch, cup of coffee warming her hands, watching the sunrise. She looked different now, stronger, more assured. The haunted look had faded from her eyes, replaced by quiet determination. Behind her, she heard Jacob moving about, preparing breakfast as he did every morning. "Rider coming," she said without turning. Jacob joined her, squinting down the trail. "Just one, moving easy." They waited, hands near weapons but not drawn. These days, they'd learned to be ready without being aggressive. The rider emerged from the trees. Worth, the tracker who'd walked away from Garrett that first night. "Ma'am, Thornton." He touched his hat, remaining mounted. "Mind if I speak my piece?" "Speak," Jacob said simply. "Garrett's lost it, completely. After you cut him, ma'am, something broke inside. He's drinking heavy, talking wild. Run off 2 more hired guns with his ravings." "Why tell us?" Elizabeth asked. "Because Mary Sullivan asked me to." Worth shifted in his saddle. "Girl's scared. Garrett's been asking about her, making threats. She wanted you to know she's leaving town tonight, heading to her cousin in Denver. Wanted to thank you for trying to help. Is she safe until then?" "I'm seeing to it. Couple other folks in town are helping. Turns out Garrett's made more enemies than friends lately." Jacob stepped forward. "There's more." "What aren't you saying?" Worth smiled grimly. "You're sharp. Yeah, there's more. Federal marshals coming to town. Someone sent word about irregularities in Judge Harwick's court. Anonymous letter, detailed real specific-like about guardianship papers, bribed witnesses, the whole thing." Elizabeth's breath caught. "When?" "Should be here by week's end. Name Samuel McKenna. Good man, they say. Can't be bought. And Garrett knows? Not yet, but he will soon. When he does..." Worth shrugged. "Man like that, cornered. No telling what he'll do." "Why warn us?" Jacob asked. "What's your angle?" "No angle, just, I've done things for money I ain't proud of. Tracked people who maybe didn't deserve tracking, but I got lines, and Garrett crossed them. The way he talks about women? What'd he plan for you, ma'am?" He shuddered. "Some things money can't wash clean." "Thank you," Elizabeth said softly. "For the warning. For helping Mary." "Don't thank me yet. Garrett's still out there, still dangerous. You folks watch yourselves." He turned his horse, then paused. "Oh, and Thornton? That offer you made about accidents happening? Might be some folks in town wouldn't look too close if one happened to visit Mr. Garrett." "I'll keep that in mind." Worth rode off, leaving them to digest the news. A federal marshal. It was more than they'd dared hope for. "Could be a trap," Jacob said, ever cautious. "Or it could be salvation." Elizabeth turned to him, eyes bright. "Either way, we need to be ready." They spent the day preparing. Jacob cleaned weapons while Elizabeth wrote out her story. Every detail of Garrett's behavior, names, dates, incidents. Evidence for the marshal, if he proved trustworthy. As afternoon faded to evening, they sat by the fire, the comfortable silence that had grown between them filling the small space. They'd become partners in these weeks, learning each other's rhythms, strengths, fears. "I've been thinking," Elizabeth said suddenly, "about after Garrett, after the marshal, after all this ends." She stared into the flames. "I still want to go to California, but..." She turned to him, and he saw his own feelings reflected in her eyes. These weeks together had built something neither had expected or sought. Not love, not yet, but the foundation for it. "Come with me," she said simply. "Not because I need protection, because I want your company." Jacob felt something crack inside his chest. Ice that had frozen there 3 years ago finally beginning to thaw. "Elizabeth, I know, it's too soon. We're both carrying ghosts, but maybe we could carry them together?" Before he could answer, a sound cut through the night. Horses, many of them, moving fast, They were on their feet instantly, weapons in hand. Through the window, Jacob counted torches. 6, maybe 7 riders. "He found us," Elizabeth breathed. "Get to the back room. There's a loose board in the floor. Leads to a crawl space. If things go bad..." "We've had this argument. I'm not hiding while you fight." "Elizabeth, no!" Her voice was fierce. "We stand together or not at all." There was no time to argue. The riders had surrounded the shack. Garrett's voice rang out, slurred with drink but unmistakable. "Thornton, I know you're in there, both of you. Come out, and this ends clean." "Define clean," Jacob called back. Harsh laughter. "Clean means you only die a little. Keep defying me, and I'll make it last." "Thought you gave your word. Your mother's grave, remember?" "My mother's dead, like you'll be. Like she'll be after I'm done teaching her respect." His voice rose to a scream. "You took her from me, made her defy me. This is your fault." "He's completely gone," Elizabeth whispered. Jacob nodded. No reasoning with madness. "How many men you bring, Garrett? How many you paying to do what you're too coward to do yourself?" "Enough. More than enough. But they're just here to watch. This is personal now." Movement in the darkness. Men dismounting, spreading out. But something was off. Their movements were reluctant, hesitant. "Mr. Garrett," one called out. "You said we were just coming to talk. This ain't what we signed on for." "You signed on to do what I tell you," Garrett snarled. "Now shut up and watch the back. They don't leave alive." More muttering. These weren't hired killers. They were townsmen, probably deputized under false pretenses. That changed things. "You boys hear that?" Jacob called out. "He's planning murder. You want to hang for his obsession?" "Shut up," Garrett screamed. "First man who runs doesn't get paid." "First man who stays becomes a murderer," Elizabeth added, her voice carrying clear. "Ask yourselves, is his money worth your souls?" One man stepped into the torchlight. "This ain't right, Mr. Garrett. The lady don't want to go with you. Maybe we should wait for the marshal." Garrett's gun boomed. The man spun and fell. Shocked silence followed. "Anyone else want to question me?" Garrett's voice had gone quiet, which was somehow worse than the screaming. "No? Good. Now burn it. Burn it all." But the spell was broken. The shooting of their companion had shown Garrett's true nature. One by one, the men backed away. "You can't do this. We ain't killers. Keep your blood money." Hoofbeats scattered into the night as the posse dissolved. Soon, only Garrett remained, weaving on his feet, gun waving wildly. "Cowards, all of you. Fine, I'll do it myself. Like I should have from the start." He stumbled toward the shack, and in the torchlight Jacob could see his deterioration. Clothes disheveled, face gaunt, the hand Elizabeth had cut wrapped in dirty bandages. This wasn't the polished businessman who'd courted her. This was what had always lurked beneath. "Thomas." Elizabeth stepped onto the porch, Jacob beside her. "It's over. Your men are gone. The marshal's coming. Let it end." "End?" He laughed wildly. "It never ends." "Don't you understand? You're mine. You've always been mine. Mother promised. Said I'd find someone to stay, someone who wouldn't leave. Your mother's dead, Thomas. She can't promise anything. She talks to me. Every night, tells me what to do, how to keep you safe, how to make you stay." He raised the gun, pointing it at Jacob. "She says he has to go. He's confusing you, making you sick." "The only sick one here is you," Elizabeth said gently. "You need help, Thomas. Real help." "I need you." The gun swung toward her. "If I can't have you, no one can." Mother agrees. Better dead than defiant. Time slowed. Jacob saw Garrett's finger tighten on the trigger, saw Elizabeth standing tall and unafraid, saw the moment of choice that would define everything. He moved, pushing Elizabeth aside as the gun fired. Pain bloomed in his shoulder, spinning him around. Another shot, wild, splintering wood. Then Elizabeth was there, the knife flashing, and Garrett was stumbling back, clutching his gun hand. "No more," she said, voice steady despite the tears on her face. "It ends now." Garrett looked at her, and for a moment, the madness cleared. "Elizabeth, I'm sorry, I didn't mean..." Mother said. Then his eyes rolled back, and he collapsed. Not dead, Jacob could see him breathing, but something had finally broken inside him completely. "Jacob!" Elizabeth was at his side, pressing something against his shoulder. You're hit! Oh God, you're hit! Been hit before. Not too bad, though it hurt like hell. Is he? Alive, but gone, I think. His mind finally snapped completely. Hoofbeats again. Riders approaching fast. Jacob tried to raise his rifle, but Elizabeth stopped him. Wait, look! Torches, but organized this time. At their head rode a man with a marshal's star. Beside him, Worth and several townsmen. Federal Marshal McKenna, the lead rider announced. We heard shots. Everyone all right? Garrett's down, Elizabeth called. Mr. Thornton's wounded. We need a doctor. The marshal dismounted, taking in the scene with professional eyes. Thomas Garrett. What's left of him, Jacob managed. Man went completely mad. Shot one of his own men. We saw. Man's alive, barely. We've got him. McKenna knelt beside Garrett, checking his condition. Been investigating this one for weeks. The story's coming out? He looked at Elizabeth. You're Miss Caldwell. I am. Then I'll need your statement. But first, let's get everyone medical attention. He signaled his men. Garrett goes to the Territorial Asylum. He'll get the help he needs, face justice for his crimes if he ever recovers enough to stand trial. As they loaded Garrett onto a horse, he stirred briefly. Mother, he called out. Mother, where are you? I can't find you. Elizabeth shuddered. Jacob reached for her hand with his good arm. It's over, he said quietly. Is it? All those women he hurt, Mary running scared, you bleeding because of me? Not because of you, because of him, and now he can't hurt anyone else. The marshal's men were efficient. Soon, Jacob was bandaged, Garrett was secured, and statements were being taken. Through it all, Elizabeth stayed by Jacob's side, their hands linked. So, McKenna said finally, closing his notebook. Seems pretty clear-cut. Garrett's facing numerous charges if he recovers. The guardianship papers were fraudulent. Judge Harwick's already under arrest. Miss Caldwell, you're free to go wherever you wish. California, she said softly, then looked at Jacob. We're going to California. Jacob squeezed her hand. Reckon we are. McKenna smiled. Good country out there. Fresh starts for those who need them. He touched his hat. We'll be in touch if we need anything else. For now, get some rest. You've earned it. As the riders disappeared into the night, Elizabeth helped Jacob inside. They sat by the fire, exhaustion and relief washing over them in waves. You saved my life, she said quietly. Again. You saved mine first. That night you knocked on my door. I was dying inside. You brought me back. She leaned against his good shoulder. So we're even? No, don't think we'll ever be even. Think maybe we'll just have to keep saving each other. I can live with that. Outside, dawn was breaking again, painting the mountains in those same shades of gold and rose. But this time, it felt different. Not just another day, but the first day of something new. She knocked at his door, Jacob murmured, half asleep from blood loss and exhaustion. What? That's how I'll tell this story someday. She knocked at his door just for one night. But one night changed everything, Elizabeth finished. Everything, he agreed. They sat together, watching the sun rise on their new beginning. Somewhere, Thomas Garrett would wake to face his demons in a place where he could hurt no one else. Mary Sullivan was on her way to Denver and freedom. And two souls who'd found each other in the darkness were preparing to walk into the light. The mountains stood eternal around them, witnesses to all that had passed. In years to come, Jacob would return once more to close up the cabin properly, to lay the last of his ghosts to rest. But for now, there was only this moment, this woman, this promise of tomorrow. She had knocked at his door for just one night, but one night had indeed altered their lives forever. Thank you for listening to this Wild West love story. Where are you enjoying this tale from? Leave a comment below and let's connect. Don't forget to subscribe to From Wild West channel and share your thoughts on Elizabeth and Jacob's journey. Your stories and feedback make our community special.